item on the agenda is a administrative item related to what Mr. Kennedy was just talking about, and that's the nominating committee for looking at and recommending new members for our to start in the upcoming year. And so it's then, just to give a little bit of background, I won't spend too long on this, just I wanted to give it like a status of where we're at. It's comprised of P&Z members as well as representatives from the Reston Chamber of Commerce, the Reston Association, and Reston Citizens Association. Rob has asked me to chair this subcommittee, so I will be on it representing the Reston Chamber. We also have from our committee members, John Capilla, Katie McLean, Tammy Petrine, Bill Penniman. And then representing Reston Association will be Larry Butler, and representing Reston Citizens Association is Lynn Mulston. A couple of weeks ago, notices were provided to several outlets to help us get the word out. Those outlets posted notices. This was Reston Association in one of their Friday newsletters, the Reston Chamber of Commerce, Fairfax Now, Reston Patch, Supervisor Alcorn's newsletter, and of course on our P&Z website. And next week, I'm gonna ask them if they could, put it front facing one last time next week, because the application deadline is Monday, December 5th, which is two Mondays from now, a week from this coming Monday. And then the plan is either late the week of December 5th or sometime during the week of December 12th, we will hold a Teams meeting of the subcommittee to review applications and vote on new members. Right now, we're looking for 2 full members and 1 associate member. And once the subcommittee votes on those people and we have the 3 persons, the accepted candidates by the subcommittee will be voted on by the full committee at our December 19th meeting. At least that's the plan right now. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, good. I have one more administrative item, and that is regarding Jake Hovermail, one of our members. Jake has resigned as a member of the committee effective after our last meeting. And the main reason is, while he's still a co-owner of a business in Reston, that actually was the business that he and I and our spouses owned together, but my spouse and I sold out of the business. Even though he's still a co-owner in that business, he no longer resides in Reston, and a requirement for being on the committee is you be a Reston citizen. So he had to resign. He's still helping Rob and I with the website. He's, Mr. Tech, at least he was when he was at a company and still is. So he's helping us, do things on the website. So I just want to let everybody know that. And I at the end of, after the 2 presentations we have today, I am going to read something that William Pegway's put together. He was supposed to present it himself today, but he still is having some technical issues with Teams. And so he's asked me to read this thing about a farm that's going to go near a building, on top of a building near Wegman. So he just wanted me to read sort of how that came about. And it's kind of interesting. And with that, we can get started. The first item on the agenda after that is Bill Mayland. It says here on our agenda tentative, but I see him online. And Bill, do you have a presentation regarding parking reimagined to talk to us about?
Yes, Michael Davis and Austin Gastro will be leading the presentation for Department of Planning Development, Land Development Services. So, but Mike or Austin has a presentation ready to go.
Great, go for it.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. We want to speak to you about reimagining parking in Fairfax County. My name is Michael Davis, and I'm the project manager for this parking effort. My agency, Land Development Services, is teaming with the Department of Planning and Development on this project. Austin Gastrell from Planning and Development will be co-presenting with me tonight. Parking has a profound influence in Fairfax County. With some exceptions, all land uses are required to provide parking. Driving remains a common activity, and developers and property users feel obligated to provide it, even in places where it's not required. However, we must weigh the value of parking against other desirable community elements such as affordability, equity, the environment, site design, and economic viability. The need to provide more parking than necessary and meet confusing and restrictive regulations hinders the accomplishment of these goals. The current regulations place a higher importance on driving and parking than the possibility of repurposing excess parking to increase housing options. Regulations create challenges for startup businesses looking for affordable space when needing to meet paper parking requirements. The lack of flexibility creates lost opportunities to adjust development to preserve or enhance community space. Our presentation tonight creates an outline for an enhanced approach to parking regulation in the county, one that looks at the context of development, as well as acknowledging that flexibility and predictability are important considerations for continuing our efforts for better, more compact land design, affordability, and economic growth. A primary goal of this project is right-sizing parking requirements. This concept involves sizing parking to the average demand for it. This approach applies to all areas of the county, from rural, suburban to high-intensity urban development. Because of these differences in character, different minimum parking requirements should apply. In lower density areas, we propose conventional approaches to parking, but want to avoid burdensome requirements. In medium density areas, we're accommodating innovation, but allowing conventional approaches. In higher density areas, we're pushing for innovation and discouraging conventional approaches. Overall, the next wave of development investment should involve less parking. If we meet the goal of right-sizing parking requirements, then other important goals can be realized. Opportunities for better land stewardship occur, such as designing sites to exchange parking for community and green spaces. Less parking with better land design, access to multiple transportation modes, and a mix of uses dampens auto travel. From an administrative point of view, simplification and flexibility in our parking requirements is expected to create opportunities beneficial to the community. While we strive to right-size parking and requirements, we also know there are places and uses that present parking challenges. This project continues to evaluate options to address those issues. The Parking Reimagined project is intended to examine and adjust parking requirements and processes to provide community benefits. In our effort to create places where people want to be, autos and parking must have less influence in design. The Cap 1 site in Tysons, the Mosaic District in Merrifield, and Reston Town Center are great examples where a walkable, compact, mixed-use urban design has taken precedence over street-oriented surface parking lots that create a vehicle gulf between the roadway and the place you want to be. These Main Street and urban, rail and transit accessible places are as much a part of the county's fabric as low-density, tree-covered residential suburban development. Both places, and the arc of development in between, offer desirable characteristics for living, work, and entertainment. The county needs a balance to thrive, and this includes something as mundane as parking requirements. Our approach to parking seeks to acknowledge and respect the range of development within the county. Further, we want to diminish obstacles to business opportunities. Meeting arcane parking requirements and rates designed for more car-centric activities of 30 to 40 years ago constrains new business ventures, reinforces poor land and environmental management activities, and creates opportunity costs for uses that will provide community benefit, such as more affordable housing. All of this helps the county succeed. We've created a proposed approach to parking that's depicted here. With the intent of right-sizing parking, this is particularly important where the densities and intensities of development allow for greater innovation in approaches. Thus, this map shows a concentration of areas subject to lower parking requirements. At least 90% of the county's land area would remain subject to baseline requirements with modifications. Lower minimum parking requirements are focused on areas defined in the comprehensive plan as growth areas. In this framework, the following tiers are proposed. Development in suburban centers is of relatively lower density, but the concentration of development within these areas provides opportunities for modest connectivity and shared activities that reduce parking demand. A 10% baseline reduction for commercial and multifamily development is proposed. Revitalization areas such as community business centers, commercial revitalization areas, and commercial revitalization districts are proposed for a 20% baseline reduction, which is consistent with today's standards. This includes commercial and multifamily development. Transit station areas and the Tysons Urban Center are areas adjacent to transit-oriented development areas and are proposed to have a 30% baseline reduction. These areas are generally planned for higher density, mixed-use development with good access to Metro Rail, as well as higher quality transit availability and a more walkable environment. Transit-oriented development areas are proposed to have a baseline 40% reduction in the minimum parking requirements. These are areas within 1/2 mile of a metro station, and the expected development will complement Metro Rail. Parking should be minimized to support the rail and transit investments and create a pedestrian-scaled community. Planned transit Tysons, also referenced as PTC zoning, are sites within the Tysons Urban Center that have been rezoned or have opted in to the PTC district. The Tysons Urban Center is the county's downtown with the highest allowable densities. With acceptance of the PTC designation, property owners have low or no minimum parking requirements and maximum parking requirements. The project proposes to retain these criteria for the Tysons Urban Center. The parking rates and area reductions under consideration with this project affect minimum requirements. Caps on parking, known as maximums, are only proposed with development that chooses to opt into no minimum requirement. This option would only be available in the Tysons PTC and in transit-oriented development districts. With this project, we also anticipate establishing minimum bicycle parking requirements, encouraging more EVC parking, and maintaining supplies of accessibility parking even when the overall parking supply is reduced. Now I'll turn the presentation over to Austin.
Thank you, Mike. The next few slides show examples of base or minimum parking rates being examined by this project. The existing single-family attached dwelling or townhouse rate is 2.7 spaces per unit, with 1 space having convenient access to the street. In response to concerns regarding lack of available or visitor shared parking in townhouse communities, we're proposing to alter or redistribute the existing single-family attached rate by requiring that 0.2 spaces of the total 2.7 spaces per unit are required or provided for visitor or shared use. Reductions to the single-family detached base rate are currently only proposed in the TSA districts, TOD, and PTC districts. The proposed multifamily dwelling rate under consideration is 1.3 to 1.6 spaces per dwelling unit. This is an example of parking rate right sizing. The Institute of Transportation Engineers maintains national parking demand data through their document Parking Generation. ITE's data shows that national average parking demand for suburban, non-transit served multifamily dwellings is 1.3 spaces per unit. Staff is also considering the possibility of a proposed multifamily dwelling rate based on bedroom number and where applicable reductions of this rate may be applied. The proposed restaurant rate under consideration is between 8 and 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area and 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of outdoor seating area in excess of 1,000 square feet. This is an example of rate right sizing and simplification. The size of a building or tenant space is a known factor throughout all phases of a project's lifespan. By transitioning to a single rate solely based on square footage, we can provide greater predictability for property owners and prospective tenants. The proposed retail sales rate under consideration is between 2 and 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. And I would just say that this is a standalone retail use. Think of a Walgreens that doesn't have a drive-through. It's a good example of this type of use. This is an example of right sizing of a current retail sales rate. Our current rate has not been revised since 1978. Since then, significant changes in shopping behavior have occurred, such as online sales, which lowered parking demand. Local and national data shows that average non-December parking demand for all retail uses is below the current county requirement. And a building that has 2 or more retail type uses is considered a shopping center, and that is parked under a shopping center requirement, which is a different requirement. The example on this slide shows how the proposed retail sales rate would transition or decrease through the tiered framework. The minimum parking requirement or base rate would decline by 10% in the suburban center, 20% in the revitalization area, 30% in the transit station area, and 40% in a transit-oriented development. The existing office parking rate was last updated in 1988 when the 3 current rates were adopted. We're proposing to simplify this into 2 rates based on building size. The proposed office rate range under consideration for an office under 50,000 square feet is between 3 and 3.6 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and the range under consideration for an office over 50,000 square feet is between 2 and 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Similar to retail uses, office parking demand has changed in the last 35 years. Remote working and flexible in-office schedules were becoming more commonplace prior to the pandemic, lowering average parking needs. Further, within the county, rail and bus transit services have expanded, providing travel alternatives. National survey data demonstrates that average parking demand for all office types is less than the current county requirement. This example shows how the parking rate for an office over 50,000 square feet would translate through the tiered framework. The minimum parking requirement would decline by 10% in each tier from the proposed base rate to a TOD. So again, 10% in the suburban center, 20% in the revitalization area, 30% in the transit station area, and 40% in the transit-oriented development district. This is an example of right sizing of a minimum parking requirement. The proposed warehouse rate shown is an example of rate simplification. Many industrial uses have a parking rate based on number of employees or company vehicles, but a minimum of 1 space per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. We're proposing to simplify this rate by basing it on the square footage of the building or number of employees, whichever is less. The size of a building can be determined at all phases of a project's lifespan, and parking supplies can be sized accordingly. Number of company vehicles is not constant, which can require excess parking to be provided. A requirement to provide additional parking can create hardships and prevent establishment of new businesses. Basing of the proposed rate on square footage or number of employees, whichever is less, also allows for flexibility to address specific needs of a business while also reducing conflicts which can arise when new tenants propose to take over existing tenant spaces. As part of this project, staff has worked with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation to propose bicycle parking requirements as a new section of the zoning ordinance. The bicycle parking section would include minimum required bicycle parking rates, general provisions such as when bicycle parking is required, as well as locational and structural requirements for bicycle parking. Bicycle parking minimum requirements would be treated similar to vehicle parking by establishing a table of minimum requirements organized by land use classification. Bicycle parking rates for land uses and use classifications are proposed to be based on either a percentage of required minimum vehicle parking or a set number of spaces. These requirements would also align with our proposed tiered framework by setting increased bicycle parking requirements in areas with denser development or in areas that are in closer proximity to public transit. This slide shows examples of land uses or use classifications, which could be subject to minimum bicycle parking requirements based on a percentage of required vehicle parking spaces, as well as how these requirements would change for uses located in revitalization areas, transit station areas, transit-oriented developments, or the Tyson's Urban Center. And as a reminder, and I should have mentioned this earlier, all rates shown are subject to change, and ranges for these rates will be advertised to the board. So in this case, you can see on the screen, it would be a 5% required vehicle parking spaces as a base rate, 10% of required vehicle parking spaces when located in a revitalization area, and 15% of required vehicle parking spaces when located in a TSA, TRD, or Tyson's Urban Center area. This slide shows an example of minimum bicycle parking requirements for industrial uses based on location and a specific number of spaces. So instead of a percentage of the actual base uses vehicle parking rate, it's a physical number of spaces that would be required for these types of uses based on their location. Since the kickoff in this project in October 2021, we have conducted nearly 70 project meetings, which included supervisor-sponsored town halls, individual project meetings with all board members, as well as meetings with board advisory committees, community service groups, community associations, industry groups, and internal county agencies to discuss and seek feedback on this project. Since January, we've met monthly with our community project work group to discuss elements of the proposal and gain their perspectives. These discussions have been important in modifying our proposal and framing our public discussions of them. Our initial public outreach efforts focused on values and rationales associated with this project. Our current phase of engagement is intended to give the community the ability to react and comment on tangible proposals. The updated project timeline before you shows our goal of bringing a complete proposal back to the Planning Commission and Board in early of 2023. And I'll take the time now to say that tomorrow, actually at 1:30, we are meeting with the Land Use Policy Committee to unveil a complete draft ordinance. So it is posted on our webpage currently. We posted it today. And tomorrow we will be presenting that a draft ordinance and an update to the board to include proposed administrative language, as well as bicycle parking requirements, loading requirements, the entire package, we'll call it. And we'll be opening a public comment period shortly after that meeting for the public to comment on our proposal. Lastly, as stated, we have a project webpage that is regularly updated with information and opportunities for the public to participate in the Parking Reimagined project. I'd like to thank you for your time tonight and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thanks, guys. If anybody has a question, use the hand, raise your hand electronically, or if you can't figure it out, raise your hand visibly. I'll do my best. I'm not seeing anybody. Anybody have a question?
Yeah, this is Bill Henneman. I don't see a hand raising function.
Go ahead, Bill.
Excuse me. My question is, have you considered including a requirement for at least EV charging readiness? You know, that a certain percentage of the parking spaces at least have conduits to them and a space where the electric charging apparatus could be installed. It doesn't have to be installed up front necessarily, but at least the infrastructure.
Sure.
This would be a good opportunity for that.
Yeah, we have. We earlier in the project spent a good deal of time looking into EV requirements and the possibility of putting these minimum requirements to include EV ready infrastructure. We, along with our consultant, looked into that possibility, but were informed that we do not have enabling legislation in the state yet to require those types of EV ready or EV installation for by right uses. We're still seeing it for under proffer conditions and things like that, but for by right uses, we were not able to have a minimum requirement in the zoning ordinance. I would hope to see that change within the next year or two with enabling legislation possibly being proposed. And at such time, we would then relook at the issue.
Well, I'm not sure what the enabling legislation requirement is, and I'll certainly defer to the county's lawyers on what they think they can and can't do. I would note that the building code doesn't say anything about it, so it's not like you would be upsetting a building code provision because it's silent on the subject. So it explore it. If you can do it out in addition to the proffer settings, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify, yeah, we had our county legal team look into that, and what they said was that, you know, we need specific legislation that would say that the zoning ordinance could require EV, and we just didn't have that legislation in place. So,
well, the governor's going to muck around with zoning regulations, according to his conference, I guess, earlier this week, or maybe it was last week. So be there, be active, and maybe you can get something good out of it.
Okay, Bill, thanks. I think Matt had his hand up next, and then I see Dave and Sue and Dick Kennedy have their hands up.
Hi, Matt here. 4 years reduction in parking as far as it pertains to multifamily units. I didn't see a breakdown between whether it was studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, or 3 bedrooms. Just with some previous work I've done professionally, the parking ratio is set based on, you know, whether the unit is a 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, etc., not for any type of unit. So a studio would have a lower parking requirement than a 2 or 3 bedroom. Is that being addressed, or is it just a flat, you know, 1.6 for every single dwelling unit in a multifamily project?
It would be in the tiered framework. We're looking at some options for identifying rates based on bedrooms. So in the base rate that we're proposing, which is 1.3 spaces per unit, that's a little bit less than the current requirement, which is 1.6. And when you look at the website, you'll be able to see this more clearly with the information that we've put up. As you move through the tiered framework, we do move toward a bedroom rate. I think that begins in the revitalization areas in the county. So there's a rate that's based directly on the number of bedrooms in a structure. And so from that forward, there's a reduction in the number of bedrooms required as you move through the tiered framework. So,
Okay.
so we had thought about putting all of the multifamily rates in that framework, and we still could propose that. But at this point, we're only focused on those areas that have higher density. And it seemed more, after we talked with our consultant about how you would apply a per bedroom rate, their suggestion was that you would look at that in the higher density areas rather than kind of universally in the county. So with our current proposal, that's the approach we've taken.
Okay, I think that clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Kennedy, what you got?
First of all, thank you for going through this process, and I think it is going to be very useful. There's a couple of questions though, because at Reston Planning and Zoning, we hear a lot of arguments about parking from the side that a lot of the citizens that come to us talk about not enough parking, and they're worried about that. What happens when there's visitors? What happens when there's a big party? Those sorts of issues. Do you want to try to? I have two other questions that you may want to go in and out of, but do you want to try to address that now first?
Sure. I think Mike and I can kind of tag team this answer, but I should have elaborated a little bit more in the presentation there. When it comes to visitor parking that you mentioned, usually we're talking about townhouse communities where that's the biggest issue is visitor or shared parking. And so our current proposal looks to increase, well, not increase, the parking rate is as proposed is 2.7 per unit. That's the same rate that we currently have. However, what we are adding is a requirement as proposed to add 0.2 of the total 2.7 spaces per townhouse unit or attached dwelling unit be provided for visitor or shared use on site. And so currently the way it works is that if I have a 2.7 rate, I could have all of my 2.7 spaces on site through a garage and through a driveway. And so then there's no other shared parking on site at that point. And then units that maybe don't have a driveway or don't have a garage then wouldn't have that amount of on-site parking. And so what we're proposing again is to add that 0.2 requirement, which would increase that visitor or shared parking on site.
Yeah, just to kind of dovetail on that a little bit, we've also been looking at other jurisdictions as part of this project and what they do for townhouse development, and it's a mixed bag. But what we've seen in both Prince William County and in Arlington County is the same approach of distinguishing between either whether you have a 1-car garage or a 2-car garage, or 1 or 0 car garage versus a 2-car garage, and trying to separate out additional parking for people coming to the townhouse development. Arlington in their baseline rates also has an additional requirement for visitor parking in their base townhouse rate. So it's something that we have been trying to thread the needle on with this project, in the sense that our approach generally is to try not to create more parking. Getting back to the presentation, trying to balance that out with these other values that we have. But it's also been a situation where we've had a lot of conversations about townhouses and parking issues, and most of those are related to older townhome communities that have had less of a parking requirement over time. So we think the current rate is a good rate. It does provide, we think, an adequate amount of parking, and it's also a little bit above the other jurisdictions as far as the minimum baseline requirement. But nevertheless, that stratification, we hope, will get us some more visitor and shared parking within those communities.
Thank you. It sounds like you're looking at it closely, and that's helpful. When you tie this to the land issues behind affordable housing, that's where I'm very much for doing what you're talking about. But we also need to make sure that we're not creating problems for the future. The other issue there is that we do have already built a large number. I'm going to guess over 1,000 units, probably 3,000 units that are related, and they're high density, and they're related to the transit areas. Are you able to get any data? In those areas, when they were approved, there were significant, not, I don't know what the right word is, but there was some very noticeable, if not very challenging reductions in parking, because it's a principal part of the cost, and particularly in higher density areas. And I would hope that you're getting some data now and going out of your way to try to find whether those estimates were for the younger, smaller families that are attracted to these TSA areas, how that's playing out.
We have been getting data. We've been getting data from a number of different sources. We've gotten some national data as well as some local data.
Does that include Reston?
Yes, it does. I think we have one site in Reston that we were looking at where we were able to identify an alignment between the availability of Metro Rail and lower parking demand. What we're seeing is much less parking demand than what the current rate is on a per unit basis. So, and that also correlates to the bedroom discussion that we had a few moments ago, where, if you have a lower or if you have a higher number of studio apartments or one bedroom apartments, that generates less parking demand, particularly in these transit oriented districts, than 2 and 3 bedroom apartment buildings. So, but overall, I mean, even for like a 3-bedroom, we're seeing that the parking demand is lower than what our current county rates are. In some cases, significantly lower, even in suburban areas that are not really, that convenient to transit. We're still seeing much lower demand than what our ordinance currently requires. So that has been a big impetus for really looking hard at multifamily and what the right rate should be for that, particularly in the higher density areas.
Okay, well, I think that point is a good one, because many of these developments have already had significant reductions approved in the amount of parking because of the transit area issues. So if you're going beyond that, that's going to be interesting. But I think we need to watch those two trends. The other thing is the longer, when you look at planning over time, 5, 10, 15 years out, our transportation uses are probably going to be a lot different and probably demanding less parking. But it's a delicate subject as to how we move to that. Have you done any thinking about that, or any ways to deal with the fact that we're, over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we're going to have significant changes in parking and cars and all that?
Yes, we have. One of the things that we've been looking at, for various uses and the characteristics associated with the uses, as part of the effort that we are engaged with on right sizing parking for retail, for office, that sort of thing. And there were trends that were occurring prior to COVID that would continue regardless of the massive change in habits that occurred during the COVID outbreak. For example, office, there was already a trend toward remote working, flexible schedules, and that sort of thing that reduced overall demand for office parking. For retail, online sales was having an effect on retail parking demand even before the pandemic occurred. So, it remains to be seen from that point of view and what the long-term implications are for remote working, for online sales. Clearly, I think online sales are probably more reliable as a continuing practice. And restaurant ordering from restaurants for delivery. The real question remains, of how many people will eventually be back in an office setting. That being said, the other thing that we've been looking at as part of this project is the trends that have occurred as far as multimodalism. And I've been looking at some data. The county collects data. It also has the American Community Survey by the Census Bureau. And those data points are also indicating a trend toward a higher mode split. When a lot of these parking rates were established in the 80s, there was not a lot of transit availability in the county. Probably a lot of the Orange Line may have been available, but clearly no Silver Line, maybe not the Yellow Line to Huntington yet. So those are facilities that have become available over the last 30 years, in addition to these higher density developments that we have been approving and implementing at the Metro Rail stations. So that has had a significant change on mode split. Today, 30% of employed people are not driving alone. They're either working from home, and this is from 2019, so it's pre-pandemic statistics. They're either working from home or they're using other modes of transportation. And that, in the county, that's pretty significant relative to aligning with what we are looking at with regard to right-sizing parking with this project.
And just finally related to that, are you looking at any of these? I don't know what the right word for it is, but it's automated cars where you can call up and have a car come to your place, and there's no one in it, but or there is someone in it, and it's very feasible, and it's coming from a different parking area. That would require substantially less parking in a lot of our higher density activities. Are you looking at that at all?
And I'll let Mike fill in where need be, but we didn't per se look at autonomous vehicles. I believe what you're talking about, where I could call a car
Yes.
would show up without a driver. That is coming. Is it here yet? No, but it's coming, and
Right.
It's something that I think our economy and our general trends will adapt to over time. But as it comes to rideshare, so your Ubers, Lyfts, things like that, as well as just carpooling, these types of rideshare opportunities do exist, and I think that falls into that mode split that Mike was talking about. That we factor that in as a part of ways that people are commuting in the current day and age.
Thank you.
Well, I think also, I think, it depends on who you listen to as to how quickly autonomous vehicles will actually be available. That range has gone from 5 to 35 years or more before that happens. So, clearly that would have a downward push on parking potentially. So, it's not really, as Austin indicated, it's not really been a factor in our discussions and recommendations for parking, but certainly that flexibility, we can look at it again if that situation changes with autonomous vehicles. But to Austin's point about Uber and Lyft, what that 70-30 percentage split doesn't account for are those types of trips that are personal in nature, which is another element of these compact developments that we are trying to foster and align the parking supply to, is that if you can walk or bike to your destination easily, then you're not going to be driving and parking from one point to the other. And certainly, countywide, there is a lot more to do with multimodalism for biking and walking as well. But this sets the stage and also aligns with those goals and approaches to try to create a more multimodal community and create a more walkable and bikeable community.
Thank you.
David and Sue?
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And thank you for reducing parking, because I think it will be key to the success of the metro stations, especially the Silver Line. Are there ways that you are working to make Kiss and Ride run more smoothly through the TOD areas?
Unfortunately, that's probably not something that's within our project scope.
Okay.
It's probably a conversation to be had with our county Department of Transportation. And they liaison with Metro to be able to foster that a little bit better. I mean, part of it, some of the access locations are not the best for that type of activity. But there are, some of the designs associated with the project, particularly at the Reston Town Center Station on the south side, has a little bit better opportunity for the Kiss and Ride activity. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag with the Silver Line extension through Reston, but probably something that would be discussed with FCDOT if we're looking to enhance those capabilities in some manner.
Okay.
I've got a couple of questions. They're linked. First of all, I think this is outstanding. We may soon finally have some fixed but flexible guidance for developers and folks who are putting in new facilities. Two-part question. One of which is, what objections to this approach do you anticipate having to field and respond to? And part B is do you think, given the fact that what you've cited is data that says need is, or demand is much less than maybe you predicted, or maybe you would have expected, have you gone far enough? And do you have a means, is this policy have a means for ratcheting back not only new development, but existing development 5, 10, 15 years from now, when demand is even less for single occupancy vehicle traffic and parking and that sort of stuff? So over to you.
Sure. So I think pretty much with all of our amendments that we've had go through in the recent years, there's generally an 18-month review period that the board asks us to come back in 18 months after authorization, after an amendment has been approved, to kind of respond on how we think our approved language is going, what the impact has been. And at that time, you would hope that after that period of time, if there were certain uses that maybe we got wrong, maybe certain uses we didn't go low enough on or far enough on, that we could highlight those at that point. I would think as well that seeing that this majority of this ordinance hadn't been touched since the 80s, barring mall parking updates and such, we do see that the zoning ordinance is a living and breathing document and would hope to be able to respond accordingly in 5, 10 years when things would change. I would also say that something that we've done through our tiered framework by aligning the different areas of, let's call them areas of impact, your reduction areas, your revitalization areas, your TSAs, your TODs. One of the beauty of kind of that design is that if we have an area that is, let's say we expand a TSA or we expand a TOD or we expand a revitalization area, we then are able to assume that area into this tiered framework without having to go through a zoning ordinance amendment, because it's based on comprehensive land area. So if the Richmond Highway corridor expands in some way in the revitalization area, or the Lake Ann revitalization area expands in some way, we would be able to respond accordingly without having to do a zoning ordinance amendment to take X amount of time to be able to actually get the benefit from that.
Yeah, and just to dovetail on Austin's comments, one of the, I mean, I come from the school, I come from the perspective of no minimum requirements, but I think it's important in Fairfax County because it's so diverse geographically, density and intensity wise. I think it was important to look at the county in that framework of, there are low density suburban areas where the status quo is probably going to be remain, and these higher density areas where it's the most dynamic development area. With these higher density areas are the most dynamic development areas in the county. So I think where most of the development is going to occur in the future is aligned with this approach. And as Austin said, there's certainly room for reconsideration of the minimum requirements as we progress. I kind of see this as a first step. It's a very important step, and I think what we're doing has a significant change in how we approach parking in Fairfax County. But certainly, as time goes on, we can reconsider that further.
And just to one other thing to say, an extremely important step of this project as well is the addition of bicycle parking requirements. It's something that we do not have in our ordinance currently. It's a new section that's proposed, and by adding that, we can then further bolster bicycle park, or bicycling in areas across the county where we see by right development. As of current, we have bicycle parking requirements generally with entitlements, rezonings, etc., but we don't see that with by right development. With this proposal, we will see minimum requirements for new development in by right areas.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? I don't see any other hands. Okay. Well, thank you, Michael and Austin, for that presentation. That was, I think everybody enjoyed, got something out of that.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk tonight.
Sure.
So, Mike, could
Go
I
ahead, John.
ask
Sure,
a couple
John.
questions?
Yep.
I would urge you to look at this affordable housing issue and the amount of parking is necessary in affordable housing. There are jurisdictions that go as much as half of what the standard requirement. So I would think as an incentive for affordable housing is reducing the parking requirements for that would be good. My second question would be, are you dealing with service, the loading facilities as part of this?
Yes.
There are lots of waivers that occur. I don't think you can explain it. I was just concerned whether that's part of this.
It definitely is. And the approach that we're taking is to try, as part of looking at that, we looked at the waivers we were getting and the frequency of those waivers. So with other information about what other jurisdictions are doing and trying to simplify matters, we also are trying to take an approach that would minimize the number of waivers that we see, we hope, as part of that that proposal that's coming out. To answer your first question, we are looking at affordable housing, and we are looking at the possibility of a parking reduction, or the new terminology is an adjustment based on affordable housing. The proposal that we have in the information that we released today indicates that for projects that have a 70 or projects or components of a development that have housing that's less than 70% AMI, or area median income, that up to a 25% reduction could be provided. And that would be in addition potentially to what happens with the tiered framework. So for example, if you're in a TOD where you have a reduced amount of parking up to 40%, in addition to that, if you have an affordable development, you can get an additional reduction above that 40% lower requirement. So that is definitely something that we're very aware of. We've been having a number of conversations with Housing and Community Development to get their feedback in this proposal. And so I hope that we enact something that recognizes lower parking demand and need for affordable housing.
That would be good. My last question is, in Reston, Tysons, and other areas, we do extensive amount of private streets. Now, when you have on-street parking on a private street, is that part of the parking requirement or is it excluded from the parking requirement?
It can be part of their parking requirement.
Okay.
A private street can be counted as part of the overall parking for the development.
Okay. And just as anecdotal, like I go over to the Wheelie metro station quite a bit. I'll bet you that parking garage now is maybe 20% filled. And these days, it's just amazing how little parking. Now, COVID probably is not over yet for that.
Right.
I also noticed that surface parking lot that DOT has on the other side. I see that's less than full as well. But that's
Yeah. I mean, this has been part of the challenge of this project is trying to see what's going to happen, particularly with, I mean, this region, there's a lot of governmental operations and the feds are not fully back to work. I think they're required to only be at work 1 day a week. The county is 2 days a week. So, again, it's hard to tell whether this is going to be a long-term situation or not. But that is the lay of the land currently. So we're trying to not draw too many conclusions about the current situation relative to where we're heading.
Yeah, probably so. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if that's it, we can get to our next presentation, which is from the Public Facilities Branch of DPD, who is working on a public facilities policy plan update. And I believe Mo Ali is going to present to us.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having us.
Sure.
My name is Muhammad Ali. I'm from DPD's Planning and Facilities Branch, and we have Salem Bush, who's the branch chief for the division. This started. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so today we're going to be presenting about the Public Facilities Plan Amendment. And if you look, we do have a link incorporated. We could get more information as well. So this is just kind of our agenda for the evening, or we'll talk a little bit about like the board authorization, talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan, and then really delve into the public facility element of the policy plan. Talk a little bit about like planning commission and agency input, our project timeline, and then we should have time for questions and a discussion after the presentation. So back in July of 2020, the Board of Supervisors basically gave us an authorization to continue with updating the comprehensive plan. So that kind of includes just the public facilities element, the area plans in the comprehensive plan, and then also looking at the Planning Commission school committee's recommendations as well. So this project is really divided up into two different phases. We are still in phase one, which includes just updating the public facilities element of the policy plan and making sure that that's also in alignment with the capital improvement program, and also incorporating the Planning Commission school committee's recommendations. So project phase two probably won't begin until either March or April of 2023. And that is more so looking at the other sections of the comprehensive plan, the area plans and the plan maps, and making sure that that's all in alignment with the capital improvement program. So what is the comprehensive plan? I'm sure you guys probably have had plenty of these presentations and know what the comprehensive plan is, but the comprehensive plan is from the Virginia state. It's a legal document that, well, it's not a legal document. It's a law to have the comprehensive plan, but this is just a guiding document. It has no legal framework. And the comprehensive plan for Fairfax County is really divided up into three different sections. The first part is more so the policy plan. So this is more so looking at general objectives, goals, and policies for the county, along with looking at the different elements. The second part is the plan areas, and Fairfax County is really divided up into 4 different areas, and within those plan areas, there is multiple community planning sectors. And what the plan area does is it looks more so in detail at specific assets and what's in each community planning sector. The last part of the comprehensive plan is the plan maps, which kind of looks at the land designation, looks at transportation, and then also the public facilities that are around the county. So the policy plan has many different elements from land use, transportation, housing, parks and rec. But what we're going to focus on tonight is strictly the public facilities aspect of the policy plan. So these 2 pages are directly from the public facilities element of the policy plan. The first part of the first page, which is on the left side, is just the countywide objectives and goals. So these are general rules that apply to the whole county. And then the second part on the right side is looking more so at different facility types. And then they each have their own specific goals and objectives. And like I said, a lot of this goes much more into detail when you look at like the plan areas and the community planning sectors. So there's primarily 4 facility types within the plan. The first one is just public schools. Second is libraries. Third is public safety. So this includes police stations, fire and rescue station, sheriff, courts, and animal control. And last but not least, the utilities and services, which ranges from telecommunication facilities to water supply, sewer, solid waste. And there are other, these are the only ones, oh, sorry. All these are not necessarily, there are other parts of facilities that are included in like the health and human services, which is not part of the public facilities element. So they have their own element within the thing that also has parts of public facilities. So the main intent of the plan, and this comes directly from the plan, is to provide specific public facility guidance on the following: the appropriate general location of new facilities, appropriate specific locational criteria, such as site size, access, and screening for different facility types, service level standards which indicate the number of new facilities, methods for determining the specific need and appropriate timing of facilities, the acceptable character and extent of facilities and measures for attaining them. So based on the Code of Virginia, there is 2 primary mechanisms to implement the policy plan. The first one is going to be the 2232 Public Facility Review. And this goes back to the comprehensive plan, looking at features shown. And the second one is the Capital Improvement Program, which is updated annually, but includes future projects for the county, along with looking at the cost and funding and financing for those projects. So how does the plan inform the implementation of public facility projects? So it all begins with the comprehensive plan and looking specifically at the public facilities policy plan, which goes into the capital improvement program, but also to the 2232 public facility review. Not all public facilities are go into the capital improvement program. They can go strictly through the 2232 public facility review with the features shown. So this is just a typical evolution from a project. So what really happens at the beginning is we have different agencies in the county who determine if there's a need for either a new facility in the county or if there is currently a need for an expansion of a current facility, looking at whether there needs to be land acquired. And they kind of determine that need first. Once that need is determined, it moves over to the capital improvement program review. And this is really the first stage of the process where the community can get involved for community input. because once that need has been determined, the project needs to be incorporated into the CIP, depending on like prioritization of like the project, and then also looking at like the funding, because on an annual basis, things can move up and down. So you never know what project is going to be prioritized that specific year. So once that moves over to the financing for public facilities, and the way that the project's going to be financed is determined, whether that's going to be through a bond. It moves over into the project design, and this is the second part of the phase where the community can get involved. And what happens here is that the Department of Public Works will usually collaborate with the specific agencies who are in need of a public facility, determine how the design of the specific facility, and then it moves on into the 2232. And this is more so when Public Works submits that application. Around this stage of the process, most of the design element of the public facility is completed. And what happens is we take the review, and it's the last stage in the process where also the community can get involved again for any sort of input. Once that is approved, it moves over into the site and building plan applications and review. And this is more so looking at zoning and building codes. And once that is complete, it moves to the last part, which is the project closeout and the construction of the actual public facility. So why update the plan? So the plan was created back around in the early 90s, and it has not been updated since. But along with that, there's been a lot of strategic planning work completed by the county to develop guiding principles and visionary documents, which should help lay the foundation for the update. Another major goal has been to align the comprehensive plan with the capital improvement program. So how is the public facilities element of the policy plan being updated? So very similar to what I said above, there are these primary influences, looking at all of these new guiding policies and strategic plan that the county has put forth, which involved a long process of community outreach and trying to get as much input from the community to create those policies, but also doing a lot of engagement with agencies across the county, both internal and external, to determine kind of their process of planning for like new public facilities. And then also meeting with Planning Commission, meeting with the board supervisor district, and meeting with the land use aides and trying to see what new trends are popping up in their specific districts, and kind of including all of that into our input. And last but not least, doing countywide community engagement similar to this, and making sure that we can get as much feedback and input from the public. So we met with the Planning Commission. We had 2 meetings last year with the Land Use Process Review Committee. Did 2 this year. The last meeting was just this past Thursday from last week. And then as we move through with the project, additional meetings will be scheduled. And we get some very valid Planning Commission input regarding like themes such as co-location. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So when it comes to the agency input, these are all of the agencies that we've met with, and they include both internal and external agencies, and their input has been like very specific to their individual departments and kind of the type of services that they provide, their need, and looking at ways that they're thinking about equity, their current process for planning for facilities, co-location, and then also equity. So this required multiple meetings with each individual agency, and it's getting as much feedback from them as well. So yeah, talking a little bit more about the agency input. One of the things regarding planning for new facilities has been that the county has been growing since this document was last updated, and kind of looking at how there's not a lack of land in the county. So agencies are looking at and thinking about how they can use their current facilities more so like in a vertical development, but also moving away from leased spaces and into more permanent spaces. And then also being more opportunistic and looking at rezonings, proffers, and co-locations. So co-location has probably been one of the most popular items throughout all the agencies. They're all interested in participating in some sort of a co-location project in the future. But along with these input meetings with agencies, one of the things that we've been discussing with agencies has been kind of what facilities do you think are most beneficial in terms of mixing? And then what facilities do you possibly think that will not be compatible? So one of the most compatible ones has been the Health and Human Services. They do a lot of work with nonprofits and looking at ways that they can have like offices right next to each other, and looking at ways that they could be equitable as well across the county, looking at ways that like you can expand affordable housing with like government sites, kind of looking at like the government center and how there's initiatives to add affordable housing on the parking lot. But then also the cons of co-location, which are security and privacy issues. So like sites where there's a police station with like a community center, and looking at ways that you can protect police officers from public use, and just looking at that security aspect of co-location. And last but not least, looking at the programming and maintenance of facilities after the construction. So once these agencies move in, it's kind of like who's going to maintain the facility and who's going to do like programming in some of the facilities as well. So one of the other things that agencies have been thinking about is the One Fairfax policy. So this is the county's equity policy, and it's been implemented about a few years ago or so, along with the countywide strategic plan, and kind of thinking about ways to incorporate these guiding documents into the public facilities policy plan. How are different agencies thinking about equity? And like I mentioned earlier, agencies such as like Health and Human Services are looking at ways to meet residents where they're at, rather than have residents drive around the county, and meet them in places where there's like a higher demand, and then also co-locate with other county agencies to make it easier for those residents. So just kind of looking at the project timeline right now, we're still in the community input meetings. We already did the planning commission meeting, which was last week. So working more so on the draft language, which should be available for the community in February and March. And then, like I said earlier, phase 2 starts in like around after April. But before that, more so look for approval from planning commission and the board of supervisors. So let me know if you guys have any questions.
Great, thanks, thanks, Mo. Anybody have questions? I don't see any hands raised yet. All right. Going once, going twice. I think we're good.
Can I just add one thing?
Too late, sorry. No, go ahead, Dick.
I'm sorry, but what you presented sounded very very comprehensive and a lot of work and a lot of, but in different ways. And I was wondering, are any of those areas particularly coming Reston's way?
Yeah, this is Salem Bush. I work with Mo in the public facilities branch in the planning division. So were you asking, or is any of the like specific public facilities coming Reston's way?
Particular parts of the outline that was covered, which is pretty all-inclusive. I mean, but there's differences, like schools appear under a certain process. But are you looking to change the school systems, locations, and that's just one example. We have a new police facility that just completed, and I think that's that issue is not I mean, fire department and the police department area for this part of Fairfax County. But I wonder about some of the other parts that I don't see appearing.
Sure. Well, I'll start off by saying that this project really isn't a needs assessment. So we're not looking at facility needs across the county. That's really done by the agencies and also done during the CIP process. But there are other facilities that are not included. I think Mo touched on it a little bit, that are not included in that list of facility types. Some of those are parks and open space, which we do review as public facilities. Other ones
that
are
happens to be a major issue here. So
yeah. So we
brought that up.
Yeah, we review all new parks and open spaces that come in that are going to be publicly owned and managed. We also review health and human service buildings and things like that. The reason why those aren't in this public facility policy plan update is because they're in other policy plan elements of the comprehensive plan. Now, so we're not updating those sections, but we do review those. So those sections will be updated at another time, and then they'll look at those priorities. But this whole plan update, it does cover the Reston area. And like Mo was saying in the presentation, the phase 2 of this project will be looking more specifically at the area plans. And so we will be updating the Hunter Mill area, the Reston area, when we go through those updates of those actual area plans. I think probably sometime next year we'll have more public input meetings when we do that process as well. I don't think it'll be much of a needs assessment unless I think the only way that maybe more facilities would be added in those areas would be if they're already identified in the CIP, and we can put those in because each area, each planning sector usually typically has a table or a list or a map that shows where all the public facilities are or are to be located within the county.
Okay, that's just for the where we should be expecting to deal with these issues. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And John Carter, if you have any other comments on that, you're probably the one that's going to get into it first.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add, but there are several co-location projects in Reston. You know the one, which is North Town Center, Herndon Station, and there's co-location opportunities on all of the larger private projects. Hallie Rise, Boston Properties, Comstock. So.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. I think we're good, guys.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having us. Appreciate
Sure.
your time, and we'll be back for more. We'll contact y'all when we come back with another update. And once that draft language is released, we can reach out to you and see if you'd like to hear from us again.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Mo.
P&Z members, the last thing I just want to read what Mr. McGee sent to me. since he is having some technical difficulties. So here we go. William writes, back in mid-October, the Reston Weekly email newsletter posted an article about an open house at Haley Rise Farm. Haley Rise is the name of the overall development in which the Wegmans is located. Some of you may remember one of the last in-person meetings at RPZ had the developer, Brookfield, uninterested in a farm on a roof until I mentioned that they had one running in downtown DC for years. He rapidly took notes. The farm at Haley Rise is the outcome of that. They plan to move it to a roof and plan to expand this perhaps to other roofs in the project. Currently, it is raised beds at grade on the adjacent empty block. The farm at Haley Rise is a partnership with a developer, the farming company, and a charity distributing food to other organizations that provide for those in need. It's a win-win-win situation since the farming company is paid to maintain the roof. There is the amenity of seeing a farm in actual operation during the growing season. The developer also gets a tax deduction for charitable contributions, and obviously the charity distribution organization gets produce to distribute. And they don't all have to be charity. Almost all of the rooftop farms in DC are selling produce to local restaurants and to the tenants of the office buildings or residents on which the farms are located. I reached out to both the farming company Uptop Acres and the developer. Uptop Acres specializes in rooftop urban agriculture with numerous buildings in downtown DC. This was their first venture into northern VA, and they look to expand that. Brookfield now has a sustainability group with plans for more urban agriculture in this and other developments. As a master gardener, I participate in the Fairfax County Urban Architecture Work Group, part of a Fairfax County committee. I brought this to their mutual attention, and both are interested in coordinating with the other. Agricultural works with roof stormwater detention systems. An urban farm on a detention roof can result in elimination or downsizing of stormwater retention tanks, resulting in more leasable space or underground construction. So that's what William wanted us to learn about. I know he feels pretty proud, and I think we should too, that he, something that he brought up, a developer actually listened to and ran with it. So I think that's pretty cool. And that's all I got. All right.
Mike, on that note, I just wanted to say about the P&Z committee that is that's a great thing that this committee does, and suggesting things like that and others. There are several things that the committee suggests. I think those are all that's a very good use of this committee. So I just wanted to point that out. I know you said that, but I'm reinforcing it.
Well, good. I mean, you see it from a different side of the table, and it's good to know that, and I know you've said this before, that there's, value in what the comments and things we make just for what you have to do.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, everybody. That's it then.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Same back to everyone.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right.
We're going to have a busy new year, folks. So
yeah.
Yippee.
Bye all.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.